This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Welcome to episode 281 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, happy belated Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same to you.
Thanks. We're at the tail end of the 4-day weekend. Did you head to the theater at all?
Not for Thanksgiving proper. I did go to the theater during the break,
Okay.
but not on like Thanksgiving or Black Friday or anything like that.
I can't remember the last time I went to a movie on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing True Grit on Christmas, and I think that's the last time I went on Christmas Day. But yeah, Thanksgiving, it's been a while.
The last thing I remember, we used to go to, my family would go to Rockport, Texas for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I believe the last time I went was in 1999, and I went with my cousin, and his then girlfriend, now wife. The three of us were roughly the same age, and went to see, we saw End of Days one day, the Schwarzenegger devil movie. Mm-hmm. And then we saw Toy Story 2 in this tiny ass theater that didn't have doors. It just had curtains.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the last time I can remember going on Thanksgiving, but I may have gone since then. I know, we certainly watched a movie on Thanksgiving. I think we watched. We ended up watching Step Brothers for some particular reason. My wife had never seen Step Brothers, so I showed her Step Brothers.
Oh wow!
She laughed quite a bit at it. Then we followed it up with I Think You Should Leave.
Nice,
which is a nice combo. But anyway, it's the end of the long weekend. There's some box office stuff that we'll talk about when it comes to one of the movies we review. But I wanted to talk about some news that came out earlier this week. Cody, there's going to be a new Karate Kid movie, which has been rumored for a long time, that will feature both Ralph Macchio's character and Jackie Chan's character from the, I believe, 2010 reboot that starred Jaden Smith.
Right.
Now, have you seen... I assume you saw the Jackie Chan version, right?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen the other Karate Kid movies?
So I'm sure that I have. I have no connection or recollection of it. So it would have been when I was young and had never returned or revisited it. But I'm sure that I have seen it. I just don't, aside from the big cultural sort of touchstones of
the crane kick and
you
haven't watched Cobra Kai at all.
I have not. I've not seen any of Cobra Kai. So
the cultural impact of Karate Kid is significantly before your time. I know that our erstwhile colleague Kiko, I believe that's his favorite 1980s movie is Karate Kid.
I believe that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, which he and I are about the same age, and it was one of those things that really struck us in elementary school pretty hard. I think a lot of people started taking karate because of that movie. The reboot, I don't remember well at all. I remember it being all right. I know it was. I mean, it's different because it's set in China and technically not even karate; it's kung fu. But this is an interesting take to put this out there. An interesting way to put this out there because Cobra Kai is a hit for Netflix. I haven't kept up with it. I'm about a season behind, but there is one final season. I don't know what that was. Did you see that?
Mm-mm.
I did a thumbs up, and there was a thumbs up icon that appeared on my my screen. I don't know what's happening here on StreamYard. So if you're watching the video, there was a thumbs up icon that popped up, and I'm not really sure why, but cool. Sorry, that really threw me off. Anyway, so Cobra Kai is a big hit for Netflix, and it continues the story of Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio's character and William Zabka. The big question I think everybody probably has is how will that play into this new film? Which I don't know how they could ignore the events of Cobra Kai and the popularity of it. But then do you leave yourself open to this situation that we talked about last week with Disney and Marvel? And you have this universe that you've built where half the people that may watch this movie don't know what you're talking about on TV.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what to expect from this. I don't remember. I don't remember much about I don't remember much about the Jackie Chan version, but I'm very familiar with the Cobra Kai Miyagi verse, as they call it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it will be interesting because I have to figure that there are, we're essentially talking about like 3 different generations in a way, right? Which is like the people who, I mean, I have to imagine that there are people out there who are familiar with the Karate Kid, the original, but didn't watch Cobra Kai or don't watch Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And then there's got to be people who, don't have any connection to the Jackie Chan, Jaden Smith one. And then there's got to be people who maybe, only watch Cobra Kai or just like that's their entry point. So like it will be interesting to see how they combine all of that to make it work for all audiences. I don't know that there's anyone out there with like a ton of nostalgia for the Jaden Smith Karate Kid, but maybe.
I don't know. That's the one I don't remember it being making much of a cultural impact at all.
I mean, it was a huge movie. I mean, I think it made like a ton of money, if I'm not mistaken. Like it was a giant hit.
That's the reason Will Smith is still listed as a producer on Cobra Kai because of the
really?
The rights. Yeah, you see like Will Smith, like what does he have to do with it? Because the Jaden Smith version. I remember being huge. But I don't know like any kind of lasting impact. And notably, there's no mention of Jaden Smith in this announcement.
Yeah.
Which I don't know.
Yeah. So the movie had a $40 million budget and made $359 million worldwide.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
So like it was a hit.
It's a huge hit. Yeah. I wonder. One of the things that like Jackie Chan. I don't know if you know this. They did a video. Jackie Chan's only like 7 years older than Ralph Macchio.
Oh, really?
And like he looks ancient compared to Ralph Macchio, which I mean certainly his body's been through much more. As a performer, but. I'm really curious to see where this goes. It will make me rewatch the Jaden Smith Karate Kid because, again, I don't remember much about it. I remember it being fine. I know it's set in China as opposed to this new one. I believe is supposed to be set somewhere in New York. I don't know. I'm very curious about it. I'm curious what the fate of the Cobra Kai stuff, if this ties into it or not, if this is something they're really going to try to make some big giant cinematic universe at the end of the day. But yeah, you should check out Cobra Kai. I can't imagine that. I'm curious how many like young viewers there are of Cobra Kai, if they're not all like 45-year-olds like me.
I don't really know, but it's, it is a bona fide hit. Or at least was. I don't know if it's carried over that momentum, but it definitely was.
I know it's wrapping up. They're supposed to wrap up with a final, I believe this is the 6th season it would be. But you recall it started on YouTube Red.
Right.
And then they showed 2 seasons. They had 2 seasons of it there. And then it moved to Netflix and it gained new life. And people... caught up with it, and people like me and I think Kiko were already 2 years ahead of everybody when it finally hit.
Yeah.
There's a podcast I did with the cast and crew a couple years ago from South by
right.
Southwest when I got to see season 2 before anybody else. So I'll go back and check that one out. It's the three executive producers and then Ralph Macchio, William Zabka, and Martin Kove. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, anything else, Cody, before we move on?
No, I wish I had more to add, but unfortunately, it's not really in my wheelhouse. So I'll live through your excitement of it.
Yeah, it's an old guy thing. So
yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
Up we have Wish.
Well, you're young. You don't know anything, really. Whereas it is my responsibility to only grant the wishes I am sure are good for Rosas.
So most of these wishes will never be granted?
Yet I still protect them like all the others.
Can't you just give them back instead?
Excuse me?
The wishes you're not going to grant, you could just give them back. Then, I don't know, the people can try to pursue them themselves? If they're dangerous, then they can be stopped. But if they're not...
You've completely missed the point. People come here because they know they can't make their own dreams come true. The journey is too hard, it is too unfair. They give their wishes to me, willingly, and I make it so they forget. their worries.
You make it so they forget the most beautiful part of themselves. And they don't know what they're missing. But you do. And now I do. It's not fair. My Saba is good. The people of Rosas are good. They deserve more than...
I decide what everyone deserves.
This is the latest animated release from Walt Disney Pictures. In time to coincide with the 100th anniversary of Disney. Cody, you didn't see Wish.
I did not.
But I did. So let me tell you a little bit about it. The basic plot line here is that there's a kingdom founded by the character played by Chris Pine there, King Magnifico. And the basic premise is that he has learned magic. And he has, in an effort to protect the kingdom, he grants, he collects wishes from the subjects and grants them one by one as he sees fit. So essentially, when someone has a wish for something, they deliver it to the king. He takes it from them. They no longer remember the wish, and he keeps them safe and then grants them based on whether or not he thinks that they'll be good for the kingdom. It's a very, very complicated setup here, Cody.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the movie, which is from the clip you saw, the character Asha, played by God damn it, what is her name from West Side Story? Ariana DeBose, is auditioning to be a sorcerer's apprentice for the king. There's tons of references to old Disney products in this film. Sorcerer's Apprentice, you got Peter Pan, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, Bambi, all kinds of stuff like that. And you immediately realize that the king has become corrupted. In the process, Asha is trying to get a wish granted for her grandfather who just turned 100. The king sees the wish and decides that it's not going to be something he grants because it could be too kind of disruptive to the kingdom, which is kind of the basic line that it's the idea that this king has been corrupted by narcissism and things like that. Look, Cody, I don't know how up to date you are with the Disney animated studio, Walt Disney Animation output, which you may or may not know. I'm sure you do know, but viewers or listeners may or may not know. These are separate from the Pixar films,
Right.
Even though they all end up sort of looking the same. These are more of the kind of fairy tale princess stories. The brand was revived 10 years ago this year by Frozen, which I don't know if you remember. Do you remember how poorly the Walt Disney stuff had been received? There was this competition between Pixar and Walt Disney Animation.
Yeah. Well, and wasn't Wreck-It Ralph prior to Frozen?
Wreck-It Ralph was prior to Frozen, and I love Wreck-It Ralph, but Frozen really returned the brand to form.
Right.
Which was followed, and there was other stuff before it, like Tangled, and I believe before that was a bunch of kind of duds like Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, things like Brother Bear, Chicken Little, if you remember that, Bolt. That's I think John Travolta was the star of that. A bunch of kid focused stuff that didn't really capture that spirit. But then you had, again, Tangled was a good movie. Wreck-It Ralph I love. And then Frozen really kind of brought prestige back to this brand. I think at the same time where Pixar kind of fell off a little bit, Walt Disney Pictures animation came back. Anyway, this is the culmination of 100 years of animation. This is the celebration for that. And this is probably one of the worst animated films that's come out from Disney Studios in the last... Look, I didn't see like Treasure Planet and I saw Brother Bear, but I didn't see Atlantis, things like that. This is just a kind of lame dud that doesn't really have anywhere to go. It has a really heady premise here. That you have to really buy into, and it ends up just being this generic story with talking animals and wishes granted, and a lot of references to old Disney movies that you may or may not catch. There's there are 7 characters that meant to represent the 7 dwarves. There's a deer that's named Bambi, but it's not Bambi. By the end of the film, one of the characters becomes a fairy godmother. There's just a bunch of shit stacked into this movie, and it never really quite adds up to much other than references to old movies, sort of thinly disguised, and a very, very threadbare plot about a king that turns evil. There's some songs in the movie. They're not for once we're not treated to Lin-Manuel Miranda songs in a Disney film. But they're not great. Nothing really memorable about this. You get a pretty fun performance from Chris Pine. I think is having a lot of fun, but it's just nothing really strikes me. There's no show-stopping song like Frozen. There's nothing that's going to stick with you like the comedy of Wreck-It Ralph.
It sounded like when I was watching the trailer that Alan Tudyk is basically doing Matt Berry.
Yes, Alan Tudyk plays a goat. Alan Tudyk is the go-to for these Disney animated films. I believe he's in Wreck-It Ralph. He plays King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph. I'm trying to look up animated films. Big Hero 6. I don't know that he's in Big Hero 6, but lots of stuff like that just doesn't quite.
Strange World.
Yeah, Strange World, which opened this time last year and was not promoted at all and completely bombed. Look, man, I don't know what you're expecting here. The movie, again, this one bombed as well, opened in 3rd place at the box office behind Napoleon and Hunger Games. I'm just not sure what the expectation here with this film is. Again, it's supposed to be celebrating 100 years of Disney, and it's really, really a disappointment.
Yeah.
Again, like I mentioned last week when we talked about the Marvels, was at Disneyland over the holiday when the holidays started and saw really no mention of this film. I'm not sure if that means there's no confidence in it. Again, the same thing happened with Strange World last year where it just sort of got buried. If they can't get another hit on the par of Frozen, I'm not sure that this thing, what the fate of these things will be, if this will be more of a Disney Plus release in the future or not. But anyway, grade for this is a big fat C for Wish.
Ooh.
Sorry, everyone. I didn't enjoy Wish, but it was probably the worst, one of the worst screening experiences I've had in a while with a bunch of screaming kids. And
oh, those are fun.
Those are fun. I haven't had one of those in a while where it's a promo screening for a bunch of goddamn kids in the audience. But
yeah, for me, I've gone to, it needs to be a press screening if I'm going to see a Disney movie, or I'm going to go at like 10:30 p.m. on a weeknight or something.
Yeah, you're gonna disrupt that kid vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is playing in theaters right now, but probably be on Disney Plus in 6 weeks or so.
By Christmas time.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next movie, Saltburn.
Oh, it'll be some awful slum. Oh, some sort of devilish squat.
And both his parents were dealing. God, and his mother's a drunk. I mean, babies can be really affected, traumatized.
Oh, they come out drunk.
Is that right, that he had to put his fingers down his mother's throat to make her sick?
Farley, that's private stuff. Well, you told us. In confidence.
His mother's sick. Darling,
His mother was sick. His mother was sick.
I think that's actually rather normal when you're poor. I think when you're poor, that sort of thing does happen a little bit more. You must give him a wonderful time.
Good luck. He doesn't smile much.
Farley seems to think he's ghastly. Why are you friends with him?
Dirt poor, not attractive, and his parents are drug addicts. I can't actually understand.
And here he is. No, we were just talking about you.
Don't be silly. Farley, you just make up the most awful things. Of course we weren't. Hello, Oliver, darling. Oh, what beautiful eyes. Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, I told you it wasn't a minger.
Oh, but darling, you're kind about everyone. You can't be trusted.
This is the latest film from director and writer Emerald Fennell, who made one of my top 10 movies of 2020 with Promising Young Woman. This is her follow-up feature to that. Cody, you saw this at Fantastic Fest, correct?
That's right. This was secret screening number 1 at Fantastic Fest.
Okay, and then you did just rewatch it to get fresh.
Yeah.
So tell us about Saltburn and what you thought of it. Sorry.
Yeah, so with these types of festival movies, I always try to get a watch outside of the environment, especially, in a situation like this where it's like a secret screening and there's buzz and, I think can be a little bit of a you can sometimes have blinders on a little bit. And so I did rewatch it this afternoon. I do have a little bit of a different reaction to it than I did initially. So essentially the movie is about a character played by Barry Keoghan who is like a student that ends up going to Oxford and starts noticing another student played by Jacob Elordi, and becomes a little bit fascinated and borderline obsessed with him. They start to become friends, and the Oliver character played by Barry Keoghan sort of presents himself as being, from meager means and, kind of, a broken home, and has, drug addict or alcoholic parents. And so the character by Jacob Elordi sort of like takes pity on him, and he comes from a family of wealth and decides to invite him to like his family's home over I guess it's supposed to be like summer break from Oxford. And then once they get there, Barry Keoghan's character sort of starts pulling some strings and becoming a little bit more manipulative, and starts playing chess with this family until everything kind of unravels. This was a movie that I actually really liked coming out of the festival, and found this time around that I wasn't as taken with certain parts of it when it's looked under a microscope a little bit. I think across the board, I really like the performances still. Jacob Elordi, I think, is good. I think it's got, the most successful humor, because this is in many ways satire. At least it's presented as such. And I think the people who effectively get over the satire the most are Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant, who I think are both good in this, particularly Rosamund Pike, who I think is maybe one of the highlights of the movie. When she gets to sort of like dive right in, you see it in that scene a little bit, but having this sort of like elitist, wealthy attitude towards things. And I think those scenes in particular really hit. There's something that really did make me laugh where something like really bad happens at a party, and the next morning they ask about the party, and Richard E. Grant calls it a triumph, and I think it was just a very funny.
They talk about the cake.
Yeah, the cake at the party. Yeah.
The triumph is a great line.
Yeah, I think there are moments of this when it's working as a satire that work really well. I think the problem with the movie is that it requires you to meet Emerald Fennell more than halfway on a lot of this stuff really connecting. And I think in particular with first and foremost, Barry Keoghan's character, who again is doing really interesting work in almost everything he does. And I think really excels at just being like a sicko. And I think, he's sort of, found a niche with this kind of thing where you see it a little bit in Killing of a Sacred Deer. I don't know if you saw that movie, but like,
I did not see that one.
There's a really famous scene where he eats spaghetti like a maniac, and then there's a couple of scenes in this movie where he does like some really gross things that I think are unsettling and weird, and he does it really well. And he plays the sort of unsettling, weird, shifty part of this really well. The problem, I think, is that his character within the movie, as it's presented, seems to be capable of manipulating every single person that he encounters within the movie. And I don't know, that's where I think we have to meet Emerald Fennell more than halfway, is that we have to buy into this despite not really seeing the charisma part that I think this character is meant to build throughout the movie. Like, everyone is in this movie allows themselves to be sort of like magnetic towards him, or like his advances, or like the ability to be controlled or manipulated by him, but you don't ever see that. And I think if it's trying to make the case of like the rich pitying, the poor, and then having it bite them or whatever, I don't know that there's like the pity part that ever really plays through, or the charismatic part that ever plays through entirely well there. And then I think the other thing about it that the second time around that struck me is this sort of like the escalation of events. I think that there are certain elements of it, like certain reveals of it that work. And I think that there's certain escalation of events where it just keeps on like digging down into the melodrama, and things just keep getting more and more dramatic. And at some point, I did feel like it did start to veer into being too much. But, I do think that it just kind of, again, loses the sort of satire. Again, like even the character of Jacob Elordi's character, if it's trying to make a satirical attempt at like talking about class or something like that, is he someone that is like taking advantage of it, or is he doing it to make himself feel better, or is he doing it out of pity, or is he doing it because he's like fixated on having someone beneath him? And I don't think any of that stuff is there, and I kind of wonder if it's like meant to be there and just is not quite absent. So the satire elements of it get a little bit lost because it's seemingly a satire about wealthy people getting their comeuppance, but also at the same time, are the characters that are affected the most by it the ones that are wielding it in a way that I think the movie wants you to believe that they are? And I think that's the sort of under scrutiny element of it that didn't hold up for me on second viewing. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people do, where people are hating this movie or they're loving this movie and they're on either sides of it. I'm coming in somewhere in the middle, but less enthusiastic about it than I was on first watch.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the movie, and I do feel like it's one of those movies that, look, it owes a lot to something like the Talented Mr. Ripley, and that sort of genre of this manipulative, charismatic guy. And again, I agree with you. I don't see the charisma that Barry Keoghan's character is supposed to have. It's played pretty straight. He's got this, a lot's been made of the like Dickensian nature of his name. I just don't feel like it ever really is as shocking story-wise as it comes across in the visuals that it puts up. Because there's, like you mentioned, there's some really grotesque things that Barry Keoghan's character ends up doing. I don't know that they really add up to anything other than sort of a shock value, other than, it doesn't really give you any insight to his character. And I think that's the biggest issue that I have, is that this character is supposed to be this, by the end of the movie, portrayed as this sort of this charismatic shark that just ended up devouring this family. I think you get none of that from the screenplay. And very little of that from the performances, which I do think are good. I really like Richard E. Grant in the movie. Rosamund Pike is great. I think even Jacob Elordi, which is kind of a bit of a like straddling the fence sort of role. He's meant to be kind of played straight, and then you kind of walk into this satirical family, and he's supposed to be kind of the bridge between those two things. Barry Keoghan, again, is great at playing a frickin' weirdo. Like you mentioned, I think I really loved him last year in Banshees of Inisherin. He played a little bit more of an innocent character there, I think. But this one is full sicko weirdo, who does a bunch of weird shit. I just don't think it ever really adds up to saying as much as it thinks it's saying.
Yeah, and when I think about that character of Oliver, again, by the end of the movie, his motivation for his actions is not clear. I don't think, and I think the problem with that is that, again, it just leaves you with like, oh, this guy is a fucking weirdo who just completely, derailed something. Like, again, the stuff that it's satirizing is not the things that seem to be the motivation for this character who does all that stuff, because he's not doing it, again, like as like providing comeuppance. He's not doing it to make a point about class. He's not doing it as anything. He's just doing it seemingly to do it. And
he's just a psychopath, like at the end of the day,
which undercuts the satire of whatever message you're trying to portray there.
Yeah, and it's especially disappointing coming from Fennell, which I don't think you liked Promising Young Woman as much as I did, but it had a lot to, it had a message to it. It had a rape culture sort of undercurrent with the whole thing in the relationship between Carey Mulligan's character and Bo Burnham's character. Look, it had something to say. I think this movie thinks it has something to say. Whether or not you liked the message of Promising a Woman, this movie tries to have a message, I feel, and just totally botches it. And I think we've caught up with the movie before it has this sort of surprise reveal ending. Like, we've figured everything out. And I just think it's ultimately unsuccessful and really just sort of kind of not fun to watch. I mean, I like Keoghan a lot. I really like Richard E. Grant in the movie, and again, Rosamund Pike, as we mentioned. I just think by the end of it, it's just unsettling and not particularly incisive, which is what I think it's really going for. And I was really disappointed by this movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
And anyway, what's your grade for the movie, Cody?
I am going to end up giving it a B- because I think there's enough elements of it that make it watchable, but I feel like this is something that I might even like even less, like if I watched it a third time. So I'm going to give it that benefit of the doubt because I did have a strong, good response to it the first time around and not so much the second. So let's balance it out.
Yeah, C+ for me. I think it's ultimately a disappointment, especially coming off of what I thought was a really great movie with Promising a Woman from Fennell. And I think there are things that are worth it here. There's performances that are fun. There is some funny satire in this. I just don't think it adds up to exactly what the movie thinks it does. Yeah. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this week, Cody. Next week, no idea what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, the next couple weeks are interesting in that, there are some smaller movies that open and nothing big until Wonka on the 15th. But next week we do have Godzilla -1, the Japanese Godzilla movie. There's also Silent Night, a new John Woo movie that's opening next week. And then there's something called The Shift, which I don't know anything about, but I do know that it's the other wide release. So we'll see. The Boy and the Hare on the new Miyazaki movie is out the following week, and that's really the only thing that opens up wide. So we'll kind of figure it out and see. We may just kind of like have these things stack up and then bring it all to the table with Wonka, or I don't know. We'll figure it out though.
Yeah, I haven't kept up with that, but yeah, Wonka's the next huge big release. That I'm curious about, and then we've got some award stuff we can sprinkle into that you and I have screeners of as they open wider, or whatever. It's the end of the year, man. It's a bunch of crazy shit happening. Yeah. If you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter @CineSnob, Facebook CineSnobNet, YouTube.com/CineSnob. Anything else, Cody, before we wrap this bad boy up?
No, I don't think so.
All right. On that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit CineSnob.net. See you next week.